Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. In this video we'll talk about the Keynesian black holes. And as usual, let me clarify the title a little bit, like a teaser, you know. So firstly, in physics, we know about solutions to Einstein's equations of gravity, actually Einstein-Hilbert or even Hilbert-Einstein equations of gravity of general relativity, which are, i.e. solutions, Schwarzschild solution, which is like a spherical body, non-rotating, non-charged. Then Reissner-Nordström solution, which is like a spherical body, non-rotating but charged. And then Kerr solution, which is a spherical body, non-charged but rotating. And then Kerr-Newman solution, which is a spherical body, rotating and charged, right? So these are the types of black holes which are known in general relativity today. But what is a Keynesian black hole? So, okay, let me take a step back. Here we address the word black in the title, okay? So it relates to science in some way, at least, okay? That's one hint. And to the word hole in one half of the way, let's say. But what is a Keynesian black hole? Well, the word Keynesian relates to society and economics and the way the work is organized, let's say, which is Keynesianism, you know, economy and stuff. So societal organization, that is Keynesian, of science, mostly, that is black, and holes actually relates to both society and science, right? Economy and science, rather. So, yeah. And the very term Keynesian black hole is actually not my invention, and it's probably a mistake to be calling the video like that, but I still would. I mean, we all make mistakes, right? Even when we know that we do. So I'll give you a link, actually, in the description to the article about Keynesian black holes from, I assume, the author of this term, which I'm not sure, but at least it's the place where I took it from, okay? So if they took it from somewhere else and didn't cite it, it's their fault, okay? So that was the introduction. Now, the main point, as usual, will work as the inverse pyramid, you know, type of essay narrative. So I'll give you the main point from the very beginning, and then we'll elaborate on it some more and make it add all kinds of things to it. So the main point of this video is that flooding the area, meaning the area of science, the area of any type of occupation of human beings, with unnecessary people, and by people I mean workforce really, not people per se. So if you flood some area of action, let's say, of work, with unnecessary workforce, let's reformulate it like that, then this workforce would start to invent problems and or objects that don't exist, okay? And pursue wrong, again, we're kind of mostly talking about science. So, and pursue wrong so wrong is a very metaphysically charged term. I mean, in practical terms, wrong means ineffective, right? So they would pursue wrong, i.e. ineffective theories, exactly because these theories require more work, okay? Or maybe competing theories require no work at all, even in the first place, right? So let me kind of repeat that in a quick succession. So if you flood any area of, well, let's be specific. If you flood any area of science with unnecessary people, i.e. unnecessary workforce, they would start doing unnecessary stuff, right? I.e. invent non-existent objects, pursue stupid theories, and do all kinds of stupid stuff like that. This is basically the main point of this video, okay? I actually wanted to call it initially like the fallacy of overworking, but we'll talk about this in like 20 minutes maybe, hopefully. I don't want this video to be super long as usual. But that was the main point of this video, so you can stop and say goodbye and it's fine. I will be okay with that. So, let's elaborate on this a little bit, or more than a little bit. So, one of the characteristic, like, I wouldn't say inspirations, but let's say parallel thinkers in the same manner was David Graeber, Graeber, who unfortunately died, I think a couple of years ago. He was relatively young for a researcher. He was like 59, I think. But still, he released a book, again, very recently in 2018, that was called Bullshit Jobs. And this book described how, like, a lot of modern workforce actually doesn't even do a whole lot. So it looks like almost like people are being there just to be there, you know, in their jobs, I mean. Like, they could be easily replaced or even removed completely. I mean, replaced by automation or more efficient management, etc. So they are there just to work, you know, just not to have free time, basically, or something to that effect. And, well, in his book, he says that it's actually detrimental to their psyche because, again, they kind of have this feeling that they're not accomplishing too lot, they're not needed, etc., which is kind of true, let's be honest. Blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it's a big book, etc. So you can look it up if you wish. Again, I'll probably link some of the descriptions of this book in the description of this video, but never mind. One of the illustrations of the same problem in science, and again, I'm mostly talking about science, but it can be generalized, but I'm doing the deduction type of thing here because in many of my previous videos I talked about economy and stuff, and science as well, and now I want to focus this well, not all, but a lot of these things that I've talked about previously in this single point that I've already made actually previously, right? So it's going to be a lot of quotes here from my videos and other places. So one of the illustrations of this problem in science in particular is the so-called Ig Nobel Prize. You know, there's like a parody of Nobel Prize. So Ig Nobel Prize is like, you know, sort of like an ignorance and Nobel Prize, the contamination of the two. So the idea is to like parody Nobel Prize and give a prize for like the most useless and stupid research, right? Something like that. Like, well, I can't give you too many examples. I actually know that so-called president of my country, Lukashenko, got Ig Nobel Peace Prize. I think it was 2011, could be later actually. So he got it for, because our so-called police arrested one armed man for clapping his hands, right? It's almost like a Taoist kind of thing. Right? Can you hear, how can you clap with only one hand? So they've answered this question apparently. But the research is there is like, how fast the beer foam like reduces, or like, can we determine the friction when we drag the sheep on different surfaces? You know, this kind of research. So it's Ig Nobel Prize, right? It's kind of a parody, but I think it actually demonstrates a lot of problems in modern science, in particular. I apologize. In particular, the ones we talk about in this video, like if you overflow science with people and money and resources, it's gonna do this kind of stuff. Alright? So this is what I'm talking about. So roughly speaking, a hypothesis that there is no dark matter, and by the way, watch my video, that's one citation I give you. My video, Potential Energy and Other Dark Matters. Again, links in the description. So, a hypothesis of no dark matter requires no funds and creates no workplaces, right? However, a hypothesis that there is dark matter produces, kind of not produces, but attracts a lot of funds and creates a lot of workplaces, i.e. bullshit jobs in science, right? So imagine our goal is to dig for some gold. Like we know there's some, or we assume there is some gold somewhere down there, okay? So if our goal is legit, find some gold, maybe it's actually a bad example, let's just run with it. So we may say, okay, we need to find a quickest way to find this gold, okay? Because, well, we need the gold, so we'll just look for the quickest way, right? We'll make some radar scans, we'll use the magneto, whatever. I'm not actually sure if the gold is magnetic, but whatever. We'll use whatever methods available to determine the quickest way, and then we'll dig, right? That's one approach, which is a healthy approach. Another approach, which is Keynesian approach, again, see below, is to just dig randomly everywhere and say, well, they pay us not to find gold, but to keep looking for gold, right? That's the important part. So if we just dig randomly everywhere, we'll get a lot of work to do. And since whoever pays us is interested in finding gold, they will keep paying us until we'll find it. So we're interested in actually delaying the moment of finding the gold as much as possible. So we should actually dig like completely randomly, right? Like just try to ignore the position of gold in the first place, right? As much as possible. Actually, we may even know where the gold is. We just try to evade it, right? We just try to dig elsewhere in the first place, right? So that's what I'm talking about essentially in this video. So, and this is, here is where Keynesian whole comes in. So it's the concept that I've described in quite a bit of detail in my video, Quality and Quantity in Economics, which again, I'm gonna link in the description. And this video is like 2.5 years old already. It's like, oh, damn, I'm so old. This channel it feels so new, but it's so old already. I mean, damn. But again, see this video if you wish more details, but I'll just give you a very brief description. So Keynesian thinking, aka socialistic Marxist thinking, says that any work is useful for society because it's work. It creates GDP, enhances GDP and stuff. So even if people are digging holes randomly in random places and being paid for it, it's good. Even though society doesn't effing need these holes in the first place, it's still good because these people receive salary for digging these holes and they can spend this salary in the stores and stuff. I mean, yeah. And again, in this video, Quality and Quantity in Economics, I've actually described how Frédéric Bastiat, the French economist, have already demolished, kind of like the Ben Shapiro demolishes a lefty, kind of way. Again, these are not popular anymore, right? It was like 5 years ago. These were very popular. But anyway, so Frédéric Bastiat, again, I'll probably link his essay from 1848, actually. So almost a century before Keynes. And actually, kind of the same year as the Communist Manifesto, I guess. Anyway, so Bastiat actually demolished Keynes' arguments like almost a century before Keynes even appeared, right? It's kind of funny. Actually, it's very sad, I would say. So, yeah. So it's complete rubbish, this Keynesian hole argument. And here you can see why we're talking about Keynesian black holes, because it's Keynesian hole, but also a black hole, which means science. So it's a Keynesian hole in relations to science, right? So, yeah, that's what we're talking about here. So regardless of what the author of the original term meant, I think I've brought some more meaning to it, okay? That was one piece of motivation for me using it right now. All right, let's go further. So, obviously, if people are involved in such an act of like randomly digging and potentially even deliberately delaying finding the target, the objective, the goal, whatever you want to name it, the clarity of thinking and or critical thinking in the first place is severely diminished. It goes out of the window, you might say, which is another allusion to Bastiat's essay, what is seen and what is unseen. So actually I think the very first part of this essay is this tale of a broken window, how if you break the window it actually increases your well-being of the society, which is again a complete rubbish. And again, see my video Quality and Quantity in Economics. It's really easy to explain, but it takes some time. So the clarity of thinking and the critical thinking in the first place goes out of the window because any sort of clarity or criticism would reduce the numbers of areas to dig. Like, imagine a bunch of people digging randomly, and a person says, why are we digging randomly? We have this perfect method of like detecting gold underground. We can like, again, perform radar scans or like analyze seismic diagrams or do whatever other stuff. So we shouldn't dig here, we shouldn't dig here, we shouldn't dig here. So it reduces the possible amount of work, right, that people can perform. But again, the motivation of people is to perform as much work as possible without actually reaching the target under this paradigm, right? So this critical guy, he would go, you know this meme, like, how do we do this stuff? Oh, maybe I'll actually find this picture and I'll actually put it on the screen. I actually heavily doubt it, that I will, but maybe I'll try. Like, how do we find some gold? Oh, maybe find the gold where the seismic scans shows it is, or the magnetospheric or magnetic scans or radar scans or sound scans, whatever tells it is. But other people say, no, maybe just dig randomly. And this guy who proposes all these, scientific, skeptical methods, it just goes out of the window, right? Again, broken window fallacy, like personified, so to speak. All right. So, yeah. So people, this majority who is digging randomly, they sort of become blind. Well, it's hard to see the sunshine. We're deep in some random hole, right? So we observe all this groupthink, so-called, and what I also called in one of my previous videos, again, see the link in the description, presumption of competence, right? So roughly speaking, they say, okay, everyone digs and I dig, so like so many people cannot be possibly wrong. The gold is like right here where I'm digging, right? Like, I mean, they told me to dig here, so it should be here, right? Or at least it could be here. Like, of course, I have my colleagues digging elsewhere, but, I mean, my supervisor told me that it could be here as well. So, yeah. So, yes, this is what I mean. This is the fallacy of competence, or presumption of competence, that, yeah, if a lot of people dig, I should dig as well, and probably gold is somewhere there. All right, so here I wish to mention, again, we're kind of returning to the main point and going into other sub-branch thereof. Murphy's Law. I'm not sure how Murphy's laws are actually popular in the US or like in the Western world in general, but they were translated into Russian and they were extremely popular in like Russian post-Soviet world. So I even own like a whole book, like pretty thick book actually, of Murphy's laws, and I enjoyed like reading them. Like it's really good. I mean, maybe now I would find it kind of trivial, but like when I was like 16, 18, I enjoyed reading that. So yeah, I recommend it. If you're not, maybe like if you're younger than 20, that would be nice reading for you. Otherwise it would be kind of actually dull and kind of sad to read that. All right, so there is a Murphy's Law. Actually, there are many laws named by the names of different people, some of whom definitely did not derive these laws, but they're just jokingly, you know, named after them. I mean, it's also a parody, right? So it's Parkinson's Law number 2, and I have no idea which Parkinson it is. It could be some economist, but I have no idea, honestly. So, and by the way, if I haven't mentioned previously, this guy who said Keynesian black holes, who invented this term, I haven't read this article that I'm gonna link to you in the description, just FYI. So I have no idea what he's talking about, nor I have any desire to, like, know it, if you know what I mean, like to learn it. I just like the term and I used it, like why not? So yeah, I have no idea who Parkinson is, but in my book that I've read, it's called Parkinson's second law, and it says that any work accommodates all the allocated time. So roughly speaking, if your superior tells you, okay, you need to do X, and you have Y hours to do that, or days, or weeks, or months, or years, okay? And most likely, it would take exactly Y these units of measurement of time to do the X, because, well, it's just how humans operate, you know. That's where all the procrastination comes from, and deadline panic comes from, right? Like, I haven't done anything in like Y-1 amount of units. Like, I have 7 days to do this, so 6 days I just don't do anything, and then in the last day I panic and like do all the job, right? So this is at least one aspect of how it works, right? This second law of Parkinson. But it's this law, like any work accommodates all the possible time, right? All the allocated time. My law here would be like an addition, and actually maybe it's one of the Murphy's laws as well. I have no idea, but I'm just formulating it to you as I came to it myself with respect to this video, okay? Is it that any works accommodates all the allocated funds, not just time, but funds. I mean, Ben Franklin told us, the famous French spy, told us that time equals money, right? So it's kind of interchangeable, really. So Eugene the philosopher's law would be that any work accommodates all the allocated funds, not just time. So we as human beings, we will do whatever just to be sort of needed, just to be required and be recognized by payment, right? So if somebody says, okay, I need you to do this sort of job and I'm going to pay you X amount of money, you'll gladly do it, probably. Well, I mean, it depends if there's no like moral, ethical kind of problem, or political, I don't know, kind of problems. You would do it most likely. And you would try to like drag it as much as possible, and maybe like look at the corruption in like construction industry, for example, where like I wanted to like start a long rant about how government corruption in construction is enormous, and like any building like requires at least 2 times more funds than it was required by the project, but I won't do that. Let's just put it behind parentheses. So I already forgotten what I started speaking about before this semi-digression. Never mind. So we would like to be needed and be paid for whatever we do. So we would like to increase our importance in the eyes of whoever pays us, right? And therefore we need to make our work look as difficult as possible. We'll say, okay, we face so much difficulties. Maybe you pay us a little bit more. Maybe you give us a little bit more time so we can like do nothing actually, you know, etc., etc. So that's how human beings work. And again, one of the titles of this video, actually the very first title, that like preliminary title for this video that I came up with, is Fallacy of Overworking, right? So, and by overworking, I don't mean like personal overworking, when somebody is actually working 24/7, like has no personal life and no time to rest, etc. I mean overworking as a society, i.e. we're like putting in much more work than is necessary even, just to be paid for it, right? Something like that. And specifically in science, that's what I'm talking about. Like, this video is specifically about this. I mean, this problem is kind of recognized in Society Against E-Bullshit Jobs. I mean, the book is 4 years old, but it's already recognized at the very least, right? But I'm focusing on science in particular. So, in some way, you can actually say that to summarize this general point that I'm making, that demand produces supply, right? So if somebody is willing to pay for something, I can provide whatever, like, firstly, like I can make it look, okay, so let's say a person A has $1 million to pay for constructing a road. I can make a perfect project that will cost exactly $1 million. And then like a couple of years later, I would say, okay, $1 million is not enough. I need 2 actually. Can you give me 1 more? So this is how government contracts work, right? But you get the idea, right? Even if there was a guy who can build the same road for $100,000, they may not even get the work again through this collective corruption of the industry they're working in. Again, they would be accused of like dumping the prices and stuff like that, and the union would bully them, you know, like you're a Streikbrecher. I don't know how it's called in English. It's actually, again, a Russian term which I'm returning to its German roots, but I don't know what it's called in English. I mean, strike breaker, basically, it means. All right. So you're against the union, you know. Union wants higher prices because why not? Even if you can do the same job. Actually, it's a good point, actually. Maybe we'll actually find ourselves in a situation where we'll have a like scientific workers union, where people would say, no, I won't do this research for $1, even though I can perfectly do so. Like, it literally requires like half a minute of my work, like to calculate this double integral or something. Our union has established like $100 per minute bottom line, not the bottom line, how do you say, like minimum wage. Yeah, that's the term. So yeah, actually, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's gonna come eventually, like the scientists' union, some trade union, something like that. So yeah. All right. So yeah, demand produces supply. If somebody is willing to pay for something, there will be a lot of people who are able to provide it for exactly this sum, or maybe a little bit more, right? And since there is a union, there is this corruption going on, then you won't find any like actually market-oriented cheaper options, all right? And you'll have to pay more than you actually should. But at the same time, I think it's a feedback loop. Like demand produces supply. I mean, it's kind of a trivial point, but demand causes supply to rise up. But at the same time, supply kind of feeds the demand, especially in science, where supply is the scientists and demand is whoever pays for science being made, which mostly are not scientists, right? So in science, actually, supply produces demand is kind of more important. But again, it's a feedback loop. It's kind of, I mean, government has no idea about science. Therefore, scientists can say, this is really needed. I mean, we're gonna die if we don't pay for this. You don't pay for this that we're doing, right? So they have a privileged position, especially today. Kind of like, again, I mean, this trivial analogy with the church previously. Like the church says, if you don't pay us, Mr. King, you're gonna be in trouble, right? Because we're the power, actually. Like we control the people, their thoughts at the very least. All right. So, the last point I wish to make, which is kind of a semi-conclusion to this rant, is that there is, again, in the same analogy of science and economy in general, I would call it a crisis of overproduction in science. Again, speaking in Marxist Keynesian terms, which is the same thing, really. And again, just as the so-called crisis of overproduction in economy, as Marxists call it, it is caused actually by malinvestment, so-called. Again, see my video, Quality and Quantity in Economics, link in the description, where I describe this concept of malinvestment in much more detail. So here I'll just give it a couple of sentences of credit. So, what is malinvestment? Is an external agency, such as government, I mean external with respect to the market, creates an artificial demand on something. Therefore, this something rises in quantity, and later on, it happens such that people realize that we don't need as much of this as we got, right? But it was, again, produced by this external non-market oriented agency, such as the government. Or, well, I mean, one of the good examples is, again, Federal Reserve, right? Federal Reserve System, the Fed, which was created in late 1913, I think. And it has increased money supply to such a degree that it has caused Great Depression 14 years later, or 16 years later, something like that. Because, again, it has printed so much new money that people had just said, okay, I can invest in everything. I can invest in this pile of unnecessary garbage, this pile of unnecessary garbage, and this pile of unnecessary garbage, because look at how much money there is, right? And in the end, this pile of unnecessary garbage was recognized as unnecessary and was kind of in a crisis. This pile of unnecessary garbage was also recognized as unnecessary. And I don't mean like garbage per se, but unnecessary in such an amount, right? There was not enough actual demand. The demand was stimulated in Keynesian terms, i.e. artificially increased So the bubble, investment bubble, okay, never mind. Watch my video, Quality and Quantity in Economics. So, so again, it's a government's induced demand, right? So artificial demand, which is going to lead to a crisis eventually. Yeah, and same goes for science. Science is as it was like governmentally funded. By the way, watch my video, Pseudoscience and Scientific Pyramids. That's one, and where I give the brief description of like history of science, and the cult of Einstein and Hawking. Again, an allusion to Hawking's book, Brief History of Time, right? Actually, I think it's only the video of about Hawking, but I'm gonna link both in the description anyway. So yeah. So in these videos, like I speak about how governments' demand for science, mostly driven by the war needs, right? The military, like the First World War, and especially after the Second World War, and during the Second World War, anyway. So yeah, it has driven a lot of demand onto science, and after the okay, I'm not gonna repeat these points. I'm a little bit tired, to be honest. Like, I don't want this video to be super long. Like, I actually want to conclude it right away. So, what are the possible solutions to these problems? One solution is actually these. I'm going to propose two, but they are not mutually exclusive. I would rather say that they should go together simultaneously. So it's kind of one solution, but with like two parts for it. So one of them is market reorientation of science, if you wish. So in one of my videos, and I don't remember which one, I've advocated for the separation of science and state. It could have been a video called Science and Anarchy, which I'm going to link in the description, but I'm pretty sure it was not this video. But I have no idea which other video it was. I mean, I have like, I don't know, like 50, 60, 70 hours of video on this channel, so it's impossible for me myself to navigate it. So in one of these videos, I talked about this, that just as we separated religion and state, we need to separate science and state, right? Like church and state and science and state, they all should be separate, right? Because science is the new church, right? So that's one part of the solution. Market orientation of science. So no longer funded through violent oppression, i.e. the government, but funded through market interests, i.e. what people really need and what they are really willing to pay for, right? Voluntarily, not through government's coercion and violence. And the second part is network-oriented reorganization of science. But about that, I've already talked about in quite a bit of detail in my last video, Sociology of Future Science. So I'm not gonna talk about this anymore here. All right. So, yeah, I guess that would be all. So, firstly, before we conclude, let me give thanks to all the supporters on Patreon. Again, there are, I'm not even sure again. It's like 3 or 4 exclusive short videos at this point on Patreon. Again, this video is going to be published on YouTube 2 weeks later. Actually, I'm recording this on March 2nd. So by March 16th, there could be much more short videos on Patreon, exclusive videos. And there's going to be at least 2 exclusive photos there by then. Right now, it's only 1. But anyway. So thanks to all the supporters. Donations via PayPal are also appreciated. So thank you. And to conclude this rant, finally, What we talked about today is the application of the concept of Keynesian hole to science, hence Keynesian black hole, not just a hole. And again, the term is not invented by me. You'll see the very first link in the description is to the article where it was used, or at least the article that I've seen and haven't read, as I've mentioned already, because I don't even want to be honest. And my main point is that in this video is that flooding the area, but since we're talking about science, I'll be more precise, flooding the area of science with unnecessary workforce leads to this workforce starting to invent problems and objects or objects that don't exist, and at the same time pursue wrong, i.e. ineffective, theories in their work, exactly because these ineffective theories, these non-existent objects and problems, cause people to pay you more and more because you keep chasing it. It's like, you know, a donkey with a carrot hanging in front of them. Z, you know, donkey. I'm not assuming their gender. So until donkey keeps chasing the carrot, Z are being paid. Hence, there is no incentive for donkey not to be chasing the carrot, right? To actually catch it finally, right? So that's the main point of this video. And as examples, I've given you like this book, Bullshit Jobs, which is like a more general example in the economy. But then we talked about like dark matter. We talked about the Keynesian hole, like a completely idiotic Marxist socialistic concept of how economy works, which doesn't work. I mean, the concept. And then we talked about how clarity of thinking and critical thinking goes out of the window in this sort of approach, because again, it's detrimental to the very idea of what we're talking about, like working as much as possible, because we have so much workforce and we need to put it somewhere, right? And then we talked about Murphy's laws, how any amount of allocated resources will find its place, right? So if you have $1, you can potentially research the theory of everything. But if you have a quadrillion of dollars, you can also find the same theory, and all these dollars would be spent on this theory. But you can also pay $1 for it and receive it as well, right? And so and again, like the last conclusion from this is that there is a crisis of overproduction in science because of this overinvestment in science. So like maybe 80%, and maybe that's even a modest actually estimate, of scientists actually are not needed. They're doing bullshit science, in my terms at least, in Eugene the philosopher's terms. And that would be probably all for today. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add. So thank you for watching. The eons are closing.